Coming up on Network Africa. At least 11 people killed after a car bomb explosion outside a hotel in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. Malta's army takes control of a small tanker after being hijacked by migrants who don't want to return to Libya. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni pushes for closer links with Kenya on a state visit to the country. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. We begin in Somalia, where at least 11 people have been killed after a car bomb explosion near a hotel and restaurant in the capital, Mogadishu. The afternoon explosion on the busy road sent a huge cloud of smoke into the sky and destroyed 2 restaurants and cars parked in the area. Videos uploaded to social media shows blood on the ground and people gathered in the street following the attack. No one immediately claimed responsibility for the attack, but Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab militants in the past are known to carry out attacks like this. The militants have targeted the same location, the Welei Hotel, which is along the busy Maka al-Mukarram road, before. On Saturday, 15 people were killed in 2 explosions and a gunfight between Al-Shabaab militants and security personnel in central Mogadishu. Malta's armed forces have taken control of a tanker which had been seized by migrants off the coast of Libya on Wednesday. The tanker, El Hai Blue 1, is now heading to a Maltese port with the crew and migrant who will be handed over to the police. More than 100 migrants who had been rescued by the ship hijacked it after being told they would return to Libya. They apparently did not want to return. They had ordered the ship's captain to head north towards Europe. Malta's Prime Minister, Joseph Muscat, has pledged that all international rules will be followed as police will now conduct an investigation. However, the migrants, who include women and children, have arrived at their preferred destination, and Italy's Deputy Prime Minister, Matteo Salvini, described them as pirates. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has arrived in Nairobi after traveling from Kenya's coastal city of Mombasa to the capital via train. He's on a state visit which began yesterday, and he's now the first foreign head of state to travel by train on a Chinese-funded railway line. He was accompanied by his Kenyan counterpart, Uhuru Kenyatta, as the 2 leaders focus on strengthening the ties between their nations. President Museveni says the railway line, built at a cost of $3.2 billion, ends Uganda's problems of delays of cargoes at the port of Mombasa, and he hopes that it would be extended to reach Uganda's capital. Mr. Museveni's train journey of about 480 kilometers is of huge significance, as it's seen as a major endorsement in the push for Kenya and Uganda to build an easy standard gauge railway through Kenya's western border to Kampala. Joining us now is Cyrus Ombati, a Kenyan journalist, to discuss Mr. Museveni's visit. Hello, Cyrus. What's the atmosphere like in Nairobi as President Museveni makes a state visit?
Well, the visit by President Museveni to Kenya seemed to have no much kind of enthusiasm or excitement among Kenyans, other than the usual normal kind of irony and drama which Museveni usually has whenever he's speaking on TV. Like yesterday, he was live on TV, he was making fun of Kenya, how some factories have collapsed, which they know, Kenyans know very well it was the responsibility of some Kenyan leaders for the collapse. So far, many people are aware he's in town. Like now, he's taken a train from Mombasa, which is around 500 kilometers away, to Nairobi, for another night out here, or rather overnight stay here. Then he's leaving tomorrow. So most Nairobians know he's around.
Pushing for closer links with Kenya. Cyrus, talk to us about this. How else are both countries related?
Well, historically, Uganda and Kenya are kind of the biggest trade partners. Kenya has been exporting much of their goods to Uganda, and Uganda has been exporting to Kenya in exchange. And the trade balance has been Kenya has been having an upper hand, but of late, Uganda has surpassed Kenya in terms of the trade balance. That has the reasons behind all those. There's so much the production in Kenya has gone down because of so many reasons here and there, so which has generally affected the export that Kenya is supposed to make to Uganda. Uganda has slowly overtaken Kenya in terms of that trading balance between the two countries. Actually, them being neighbors, I mean, it's like you where you live, your neighbor. You can't avoid him. I mean, somebody. If your house catches fire, somebody you scream to come and help you, bail you out. So these are people at the border, people who they exchange many things here and there. So it's an issue of you have to tolerate each other, whatever you want to do. It's a must.
Let's talk about the train journey taken by the Ugandan president. It's seen as a huge significance. Why is this so, Cyrus?
The decision to take a train from Mombasa to Nairobi seemed to be kind of a score for Kenya, because initially Museveni was not keen to having the SGR, that's the standard gauge railway, from Mombasa connecting to Uganda through Kisumu. And Kenya had been stuck actually midway after it made its SGR from Mombasa to Nairobi, then to Naivasha, which is in the midway to Uganda, Kampala. And then Uganda is showed some signs of shifting their base or rather their attention to Tanzania. And you see, the whole program needs money. So Uganda was supposed to pay their bit in terms of construction of this SGR, and Kenya was also supposed to do their part. Kenya did this part, then Uganda kind of backtracked in a way, which affected Kenya's morale or rather push to have this SGR completed. By now, believe had there been enough funds for other funding from Uganda, it could have been complete by now. But now, the fact that Museveni has come here, he's taken a ride from Mombasa to Nairobi on the train, it seemed to be a score. He has endorsed it. He's saying that the train, the SGR will be extended from Kisumu to Malaba border, then to Kampala, which is kind of a score for Kenya and Kenyans at large. And in Kisumu itself, there will be an oil jetty which will be constructed or is under construction on the Kenyan side, which now will enable Uganda to kind of easily take their fuel from Kenya to Kampala through the Lake Victoria. So it's a plus for Kenya, his ride from Mombasa to Nairobi.
Imagine, this railway line was opened in May last year by President Kenyatta, but it has been plagued with controversy. 2 senior Kenyan government officials were charged in court with fraud in August last year over the building of the railway line. What's the update with this?
The construction of this SGR has been dogged by claims of corruption. There have been so many issues here and there. Compensation of the land, the goods. The cost itself was exaggerated. It was so high. It was the most expensive kind of SGR you can ever have in the region. Compared to what other neighboring countries like Uganda and Ethiopia have constructed, we can say that Kenya's was more expensive. This is connected to corruption in terms of fake claims. Currently, there are officials who are facing charges in courts, the officials who are responsible for the railways construction, and those who are in charge of the land compensation program. And there are so many other corruption-related investigations which are ongoing, which taints the entire exercise or rather SGR program. But generally, there have been mixed reactions from here and there. Its construction itself has led to some job losses, especially the drivers who are using the roads to transport their goods from Mombasa to Nairobi, western part of Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, DRC, Congo, Burundi, and beyond. So, well, it's a mixture of issues here and there.
Clara Sambati, thank you for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you so much and good evening. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you. Moving on, health workers in the Mozambican city of Beira, one of the worst affected by Cyclone Hidai, have treated thousands of people for diarrhea, an early symptom of cholera. So far, only 5 cases of cholera have been confirmed, but health officials fear there will be many more. The number of cases of acute watery diarrhea has reached almost 3,000. Health officials are also on high alert for cases of typhoid, malaria and cholera. Thousands of people were stranded by the floods for more than a week without access to clean water after the cyclone hit Mozambique 2 weeks ago. Meantime, the executive director of the United Nations World Food Programme, David Beasley, says the international community must step up support to victims of the recent cyclone and flooding that have devastated large areas of the country. He, who was on a 2-day visit, overflew the nearby town of Buzi, which had been all but submerged by raging floodwaters, and met with survivors receiving airlifted WFP aid in the isolated village of Gwara Gwara.
We need financial support from the international community. These people's lives have been devastated. They have no livelihoods now. They've lost their homes, they've lost their farms, they've lost their crops, they've lost loved ones, and they're going to need help at least for the next 6 months to 12 months to get their feet back on the ground. Schools are lost. Children are just devastated. Families have been wiped out with everything that they had. And now it's going to be a time for rebuilding.
A Brazilian peacekeeper serving in the UN mission in the Central African Republic has been selected to receive the United Nations Military Gender Advocate of the Year award. Lieutenant Commander Marcia Braga, a naval officer, will receive the award from the UN Secretary General during the 2019 peacekeeping ministerial meeting to hold at the UN headquarters in New York on Friday, March the 29th. Created in 2016, the United Nations Military Gender Advocate of the Year award recognizes the dedication and effort of an individual peacekeeper in promoting the principles of UN Security Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security.
I prepared an action plan and I established the military gender personnel to the mission. One important part of my job here was my visits in sectors. So when I'm in sector, I have meetings with the mission components, military, civilian and police. At the same time, I provide training to the military on how to employ gender perspective on military operations. I engage with local population, and I have meetings with local women leaders, a moment that I can empower them, giving voice, improving the participation. In fact, with my experience here in MINUSCA, women, they are more worried about peace because they have families. So they are a very important source of information. And with this information, we can be more effective in our operations. We can target the sensitive areas, and you can prevent violations.
Still to come on the program. A survey in the Democratic Republic of Congo suggests a quarter of the people in the cities worst affected by the current Ebola outbreak do not actually believe the virus exists. That's all.